Hello everybody, this is just going to be a quick video on how to get SSH up and running for Linux. It's going to go through the very basics as well as showing you also as well how to cache your private key passwords into the shell itself so you don't have to keep typing them in for future use. So let's get started, and what I'm going to say first is that the SSH, I usually use it in a private and public key scheme where instead of using a password, I usually go with, a key pair. However, you can just use a password. There's nothing stopping you. For example, if I was to SSH into my local host here using the password for my machine, great, I'm in. And we can even check that by pressing W and then seeing that. That's me. So passwords are cool. Plugging in passwords is cool, but it's probably not the most secure. You want something a bit more robust for security that doesn't rely on a simple password. So that's where the public and private key scheme comes into play. So when it comes to that, what we're going to do is we're going to, instead of using a password, generate a key pair. And there's a whole bunch of math that goes on in the background for this. I'm not qualified to speak about it. I just know the rough, high-level stuff of it as well as how to do it. So there are plenty of papers on how public and private key encryption work, and if you're curious, the internet has them for you, so go and search for them. Anyway, we're going to get started with typing SSH keygen. I messed up there. There we go. And now, a thing to remember is that it says here, enter file in which to save the key. So if I just hit enter now, it's going to give me my key name of this, and it's going to be stored in the hidden.ssh directory. And now, that could be cool, but I want to also use a private key of my own, or public and private key of my own. So if I was just type, say, test key, it won't actually store my test key in .ssh. It'll store it in the current working directory that I'm in, which is just my home directory. I don't know if this is something I've set up explicitly, I don't believe I have, but that's a thing to note. So if you're using a custom key file name, you actually want to specify the full path that you want it to be saved in, as well as the file name at the end. In this case, now it's asking for a passphrase, so you could hit enter and just skip past this if you'd like to. And this just means that if someone was to say, for some reason, somehow, get a hold of your private key and try to authenticate to a remote machine, then they could do that, right? They don't need anything else. However, setting a password here means that if someone was to steal your private key, whether it be through someone's come in and just taking your hard drive out of your laptop or something like that, or someone's physically, over the internet gotten into your machine, then it makes it so that if they try to use your private key to pretend to be you to access something, at least now they have to also somehow know that private key's password as well. So it's an extra layer of security that adds to the private and public key scheme that we have going on here. So I'm gonna set mine because I like this. There we go. We've got a little random image art here, and it's also giving us the I think it's standing hashing algorithm 256 bits. So it's even giving us the algorithm that it's using for generating these public and private key pairs. And so now, what we'll see, if we SSH back into its remote machine, it's still going to ask me for my password. So that's cool, but we want to use that public and private key pair that we got. So to do this, we need to actually copy our public key to the remote machine that we're trying to access. And now there's a caveat to this, and I learned this the hard way. So to copy the public key to the remote machine that you're trying to work with, you actually need to obviously authenticate yourself first. However, if you have explicitly set in the SSH config file that you don't want password authentication prior to copying your public key over to that remote machine, you're pretty much fucked. Like, there maybe is another way to get into it, I'm aware of it. I just know that I couldn't get into my machine, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, great. And it wasn't cool. So I'll give you an example. I'll quickly show you what I'm talking about, just in case to make it more obvious. So we actually want to go to the, I think it's SSH, config, apologize for the noise, by the way. I'm poor, so I have to live on a main road. You know, not much I can do about it. A lot of cars, a lot of dogs, trucks, etc. So, it's not that. It should be down here. Here we go. So, since I've already explicitly set password authentication to yes, that means I'm able to now just copy over my public key to this remote machine, like, you know, like no problem. However, if this was set to no, and then I reloaded the SSHD service, then I would be kind of screwed. I wouldn't be actually get my public key over to that remote machine. So we don't want that. So we just want it to yes, save, and now we're going to use a command to copy, SSH copy ID. I struggle to talk and type at the same time. I don't know why. So we're going to use this command here, and I believe we have to, if we're using explicitly one type of key, testkey.pub. So if we're using the regular ID, you know, of this as our key name, then SSH copy ID will work just off the bat. You don't need to specify a different key. Obviously, if you've got a custom key name like I do, then you want to specify that using the full path to the public key. And then obviously here, just the remote machine that you're working with. And now it's trying to copy it over. So now, this is what I was talking about. So to actually copy it over, I need to authenticate to my remote machine first through a password. And now it says it's added the key, so that's great. So now if we want to test this working, and let's just see, we're not logged in now. So SSH localhost, it's asking me for a password, that's cool. I got the password wrong anyway, but I don't want to use the password. What I want to do is want to go back to this config file now, and let's actually explicitly use our public and private key scheme. So set this to no, save that, and now whenever you're making changes to the SSH config, you just want to restart the actual, hello, there we go, just want to restart the service itself. I forgot to put sudo, because I'm dumb, but you want to restart the service itself so I can load the config back up again. I believe reload works as well. Yeah, it does. I just like to use restart. So now the new config's loaded, and if we try to SSH back into our local host, it's going to say permission denied. Well, why is this? Well, because we need to actually specify our, you know, the key that we're trying to use. So home aria SSH and test key. Oh, sorry. SSH home aria test key. Oh, I forgot to specify the remote host. That's silly of me. So now it's asking for the private key that we're trying to use to, sorry, now it's asking for the actual passphrase to the private key. So it's the one you set before. And now we're logged into, quote unquote, this remote machine using a private and public key pair instead of a password. So the password I put up here was not the password for the remote machine, it was the password for my private key that I said earlier. So that's a very key distinction to make. And now if I was to, say, log out of this machine and try to log back in again, I'll have to constantly put in the password, which is no problem for me. But if you're trying to, you know, be an administrator for a lot of remote machines, it can get kind of annoying and tedious to constantly type those passwords in. So there's a separate service that is called SSH agent. And what that does is, as I mentioned earlier in the video, it caches the private key passwords into, I think, the shell session itself. So we can see that by, let's just first see if it's running. So I think with GNOME, I think it automatically starts with the keyring daemon when you log in. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's. Okay, it didn't this time. That's good. Well, it's probably not good in the long run, but good for the video at least. So to actually start the SSH agent, we need to specify what the socket pretty much. So this is an odd looking command. It's pretty much just saying that we want to have SSH point to the agent through a certain type of socket. At least I believe that's the case. Anyway, So now we've got a process ID given to the SSH agent. We can definitely see it's up and running by using the pgrep command. And as you can see there, we've got the regular SSHD service as well as the SSH agent. So now I can use another command called SSH add. And what this does is that it'll add the private key to then my SSH agent database. So I don't have to constantly type in the password every time when I'm logging into a remote machine. It just references the SSH agent and then it pulls the keys from there with the password. So I want to specify that if I was just type this command, I actually don't have any keys in there, even if I typed that command. Now, that's because if we go all the way back up the top when we first created our key, this is because we chose a custom key name. So our key name, if it was actually just ID ED 25519, from my knowledge, the SSH add command would just automatically know what key to add, and it will add that one. But because we're using a custom key name, in my case it's test key, I actually have to explicitly point to the private key that I want to use. I'm getting annoyed of constantly typing this, so I might just copy this whole thing entirely. So now, whoops, what do I do? SSH add. I messed something up. Unnecessary file directory. SSH add. Home ariad. Oh, it's because I have the dot there. How did I not see that? Anyway, sorry about that. Anyway, so now it's asking just for the passphrase to the actual private key. In this case, it's going to be, I'm not telling you the password. Anyway, the identity was added now to the SSH agent. That's cool. So now if we were to log into a remote machine, it wouldn't ask us every time for the test key's private passphrase, or the private key of test key and the passphrase to it. It'll just use the test key and itself and then reference the SSH agent for the password. So we can demonstrate that by saying SSH localhost, and see it's just logging me in. I didn't ask explicitly for a password for the private key, nor did I ask a password for the remote machine, aka my localhost, because we explicitly said no to using password logins anyway within the SSH config. So that's pretty much it. I will mention one last command. If you don't want to, for whatever reason, have your private key still cached into the shell, then you can use just SSH add -d. It'll remove all the identities from the database, but I believe lowercase d will remove a specific one that you specify. So if you want to read more on that, you can go to the man page of that, and we can read down here. I probably missed it. I missed it, didn't I? Oh yeah, it was way further closer. Okay. So yeah, -D deletes all identities from the agent. Instead of adding identities, removes identities from the agent. Blah, blah, blah. You can have a read through this if you really wanted to, but I'm just going to use SSH add -D. I've only got one identity in there anyway, so it's not going to be too much of a problem. And then as you can see, there's no more identities for it. So now if we try to SSH localhost again, well, it's going to deny us because we haven't explicitly specified our key. But oh, okay, so I actually copied the wrong one the whole time. That's why. So now it's still asking us though for our private key passphrase, which, you know, again, if you don't want to type in every time, then use the SSH agent. So that's pretty much the general basics of SSH on Linux. I guess distributions may vary. As I said, I think the GNOME desktop environment, I don't remember where I read this, but I read somewhere that the GNOME keyring daemon starts SSH agent automatically when you log into a new SSH session. And so it didn't do it for me this time. I don't know why, but it may be a thing that you should keep an eye on in the future if you're wondering why maybe you've got multiple SSH agent processes running in the background, or if it's already got your private key identity added to the agent database, then that is the probable explanation why. Now, I can't speak on if KDE does things similar. I have no idea, but that's all I know about that in that regard. Anyway, I hope this has been informative, and have a good rest of the day.